when I post it up. Fantastic. So that was me last night, anyway. So I'm still pretty buzzing off that, to be honest. Why did
Yeah,
you
I mean,
get?
it's been so they're punk rock. This was a punk rock band.
No, the originally they were a progressive rock band, sort of jazz. It was jazz rock they were into, which was
Oh,
it was a unique thing in probably '69 or something like that. They came from um, Canterbury. There was a music scene in Kent in the south of England, and they came through that. The singer and the main force behind them was a guy called David Allen, and he was an Australian, um, sort of I don't know, a savant, I suppose you could call him. He was sort of into
I remember
consciousness. And,
him.
sorry,
I remember Dave Allen.
Dave Allen, yeah. Now, well, he started the band Gong after he left Soft Machine. It's fantastic. You know, I loved them all my life, me, since they did a electric Camembert Electric. Um, do you remember that, Grouch?
Oh, gee, that was a lot. No, not exactly. No,
Yeah.
but I remember him and that. Oh, so they're back playing again. They must be wanting to die soon. Want some
No,
money
no,
for
he
the
died.
nursing home.
Dave Allen died about
Right.
5, 6 years ago. In fact, I saw him the year. Yeah, he just died. He died in 2016. But is all the bands kind of they've got really good replacements for the musicians, and the singer
Yep.
they've got in is a really good. He sounds just like Dave Allen, and it's so they can still cover a lot of the Gong tracks, but they're making some new stuff now as well, which is just as brilliant as the old stuff, you know. Um, I'll post
Yep.
some up. I'll post a bit up. Um, but yeah, he was Saddam Hussein's favourite musician, you know, funnily enough. And he was
Well,
talking about he was singing about flying teapots and pothead pixies and have a trip and Selene, yeah, the goddess of the spirit of the moon. Oh, it's just fantastic, mate. Just wait till you hear this. I'm still buzzing about it.
so the reason I decided to stop recording is I wanted to show people the update on the progress of this U.S. military map. I've turned off the ranges because if you have the ranges on here, it's very overwhelming how many military ranges there are. But here you can see the various kinds of bases, and then we have uh, these various nuclear sites. I've got NASA and Space Forces on here. Like the little plane looks like a drone icon. And I've got the Coast Guard on. One thing struck me is that there are a few places, if I were the cartel, I would focus on secret landing, clandestine landing. A lot of the Coast Guard stations were closed now, but there's still kind of a pretty strong Coast Guard footprint overall. And then look how many South and Central America bases I did find that are supposedly active. And then AFRICOM, a lot going on in AFRICOM with the AFRICOM. Quite a footprint there. Not in some places as much as I would have thought. Then I had a thing that had a really strong like each nuclear silo location made a literal iron wall, but I need to get a better database and confirm, and then I'll add it to the nuke list here. Um, and then there were some like I said, there's too little information down here. I need better information for this part of the world. And then there's special forces. I got the special forces on here, and I got the intelligence and black sites. Um, so CIA and well, you can only find a couple of NSAs. I got the Area 51 is on here. Um, uh, but kind of amazing. Now the deep underground military bases that I've left on here, um, these black, I think that these are reliable coordinates, but it's hard to know for sure. Obviously, since they're deep and underground. But the whole point of this is I'm doing this for the war economy versus dual layer economics paper. Now, if the United States Empire, of course, the United States Empire is the biggest empire ever been as far as like military bases and total firepower. If this empire were extended to several different rivals, Russia, China, etc., the overall imprint on the economy is non-trivial. I mean, it's a serious, huge amount of the GDP, which brings up the issue: if war is an antonym, what is that doing to the GDP? Like, what is it? Is it, as in the Ghost in the Shell series, they postulate that the world economy is this is in I think this is in the Arise series of Ghost in the Shell, which is on Netflix. I believe it might be on Amazon Prime, but they postulate that the world economy in a not so distant future basically just becomes worthless. And then the only thing that is working is the war economy. And I feel like that is a fairly good representation of what's happening. And I wanted to get your all's thoughts on that postulate. Obviously, I haven't written the paper.
Well, I know when Obama was in, and they talked about putting a Navy base and that in Darwin, the Australian government then was talking about how many million it was worth, and it's worth a lot of US dollars to us. So it's probably also a way of shoring up the American currency. Because if you've got all that bases, what's everybody use?
You talking about this one up here? This one?
Darwin? Yeah.
Yeah, here's Darwin, and then here's the Marine Corps Robertson Barracks.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. And you've got one that's been a port one too. Is that on the port, on the bay? You've got one at Darwin this is just a Navy one, but that's got to be built.
Right. So if there's a Navy one, I don't know about.
It's got to be built. No, well, it's not built yet because it was meant to be in the port of Darwin, but some bright spark decided to sell the lease to that port to the Chinese for so many years. So now they've got to build another one for that.
Here's the Royal Air Force. But that's not United States.
But you're talking about the Coast Guard. The American Coast Guard own the icebreaker, which goes down the Arctic and breaks the ice for everybody else to get in and out. Because that was on the TV here tonight, because it's in Tasmania at the moment, to give them a little rest on the way home. And actually, it's going home to get a refit. Yeah, do you know that, Ramon? Yeah. Because I noticed on the side of it had an emblem and it had American Coast Guard written on it.
Yeah, some of these icebreakers are enormous, aren't they? They're nuclear powered, some of them. They're that.
Well, this one's not. It's 75,000 horsepower. It's got eight engines or something in it.
Yeah.
It's apparently not the biggest one in the world, but it's probably one of the best for breaking it.
Yeah, amazing.
There was also a list of deep underground military bases, which I couldn't confirm for sure, but it was interesting because they weren't completely arbitrary. They maintained, for example, that there was such a base here on this random island out here. And then look, now that I zoom in, look here, the NASA tracking station out here. So now I have to come to this layer.
Is that South Georgia?
This is, I don't know, it's Cat Hill. It's the whole island. It's called Cat Hill on Google Maps. It's like, so is there a deep underground military base here? I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to keep track of all the facts in this. But you know,
well, Ramon, when you're talking economies, we've got them out here at the moment saying how great the economy is, even though everything was virtually shut down for 2 years. But if I gave you $10 million, Ramon, and said, "Oh, look, you have to pay me a little bit along the way, but it's not due for 30 years," all of a sudden you'd feel pretty bloody wealthy, wouldn't you?
I suppose so. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
No, you get what I mean? Like, if you look at our economies have had a mass imprint borrowing spree from the reserve systems. And now they're saying, look how good our economies are. But it's really like funny money. So the payback on a lot of these things is like 30 years' time. The bonds and that for these things. So what I'm saying is, when you're talking about the military and economies and all that, well, yeah, like I said, if I gave you $10 million, Ramon, and said, 30 years, I reckon you'd feel pretty wealthy for a good part of that. And then at the end of the 30 years, you'd turn around and roll it over anyway.
Right.
No, that's what I'm getting at.
Right, but could well, I mean, obviously that could be an antonyms, right? If I think debt itself kind of robs people of their lifestyle and over time, they don't realize it. I've seen that with credit cards, right? So people, they don't realize how much they're spending per month on credit card and interest, etc. But this is, I think this is a whole other level of unsustainable, is what I think. And it just encourages. Now, it's totally true, though, that if we just shut down all these bases and came back, obviously the world would go to, pot real quick on account of suddenly places where they were being kind of ruled over. Now they're just going to be able to do whatever they like, and that could be dangerous in terms of terrorism. But I mean, long term for humanity, I think that it's a bad thing to constantly have, an expense on military.
Yeah,
that's my personal.
Yeah, you're right. You couldn't turn around and over a 5-year period dismantle most of those bases, because unless somebody else sort of came in to fill the void, you'd end up with what we're now seeing in Afghanistan, where the whole show's sort of collapsed because you've lost the there's no order, and there's no one there. Even if they're not doing it, their presence creates an order. So the order's collapsed, and then everything collapses around it.
Here's a nice little bit of information. But yeah, see, I knew there was still some in the Philippines and all this stuff. Just see. I don't know. I just think it's ridiculous. I think it's out of control, personally. But I'm a libertarian, so this is where I disagree heavily with conservatives, especially neoconservatives, who of course got us into the war in Iraq. I think it's very unhealthy karmically as well. But I guess I'm not really in charge of this, so it's kind of difficult to. I think most people, especially Americans, are asleep on it because it's overwhelming. It's information that is better not talked about. You know what I mean?
Well, it's something that they see that doesn't intrude. Ramon, it's something that they see that doesn't intrude on their everyday lives.
It's not in the news.
Right. So
it's not in the news.
It's an issue. Yeah, if it's not. Yeah, that's right. Unless it's harming someone close to them, It doesn't exist.
Right. Which is unfortunate because of course it really actually does exist.
Yes. And they don't realise what you said before is this sort of stuff is actually helping in degrading their overall lifestyle.
Well, it's certainly expensive.
Because productive money is now being totally unproductive. Once the
that's
shot,
another.
It's gone.
Another very important point is that we're talking about here. This is not a small amount of money that we're discussing.
No. No. It's a minimum 750 billion.
I think
that's about all their black project.
Because the unofficial budget of the CIA alone is 1.1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I got that one.
I think there are massive areas of industry right across the world now that are just, they soak up all these trillions of dollars and nothing productive is ever done. If anything, it's like that. For example, biochemists are figuring out how to transfer things across RNA to produce mRNA now, and so we've got. They're trying to almost digitalize people. If they get control of your, just basically think of it this way: all your internet security, there's millions of ways you can get hacked, and now with this technology is going to hack the human genome, and they don't know how they're hacking it yet, but it's getting hacked. So bear in mind, this is the next stage in the pharmaceutical game, and I think the best. Well, you know how to keep secure on your computer, and I think it's similar. It's going to have to be similar, health wise, food wise, everything else now. Just everything you consume really is going to be a risk to some kind of at some kind of level. And when the basic operating fact isn't the quality of the meat on your plate, but the profit the landowner can derive out of it. That is, the whole ethos of trade is going to fall over anyway. All these trillions of pounds that people have accumulated, these billionaires, is that going to be worthless, or are they going to, obviously keep the war machine going? Have as many of us around to clean the shit up or whatever they want you to do. I don't know. What's the plan? Wipe a load of people out, take out a massive chunk of the population, so they don't have to share the money with anyone. I suppose.
Yeah, but the money's not worth anything if people are gone. I just don't understand the ultimate thinking here.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's psychopathic. I think that's what it is, and it's short-term gain. People are doing anything to get their hands in the pie while they can.
The money's the means to the end. So the control is to have the majority of the assets in land, and everything that's on the land. The majority of, like you have a look now, the military side of it, the majority of it's outsourced.
Yeah, it's all about the land.
So it's really all about who controls the land, which then is the asset basically that the banking system's based on. So then you're starting to, you've got a lot of control then over everything if you control the land and what's on it.
Yeah, well, you've got these investment funds like BlackRock, and they've got £9 trillion to invest in property. If they see,
they've just put a bid in for the casinos in Australia that Packer had, right? And it's around $7.5 billion. Now, at the moment, our governments make a lot of money out of them. But once they get it, there'll be no taxes paid here, guarantee you.
Yeah, that's the one. That's happening. So
once again, the middle class will foot the bill twice, hey, Ramon?
Sure. Aren't we all lucky?
Well, I think have a natural life as much as you can. Enjoy it. If you've got animals or land, grow some nice vegetables on it. Well, before have fun with your cows and your animals, and because that is real value. Being somewhere with the ability to create some food and create somewhere where you can you don't have to sit in a room.
The dearest property, you'll love this. The dearest property in Melbourne now is not a place with, say, like a quarter-acre block. Not that there's many of them left. The dearest property now is your ground-based like units, where you walk out the backyard and you've probably got about 4 metres from there to the fence line.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's the dearest property. No one wants land in their house anymore because then they don't have to maintain it or do anything with it.
Well, here we go. Here's the picture that you're talking about.
I said Pine Gap.
Oh, did you send me this exact map?
No, but I know that's Pine Gap there, yeah. I can't see it real good.
Yeah, Pine Gap, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow. CIA, NSA. Oh, that'll be a black site. I thought I already had Pine Gap, but let me look here.
That's the place that's used to direct your missiles from.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, Ramon?
Hugh Northern Territory?
It's either Northern Territory or it's end of South Australia.
Like I said, this is Pine Gap, Hugh Northern Territory. I don't know if it says Alice Springs. Yeah,
yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that'll go into the. You say this is I'm going to put it as a black site. It has CIA and all this kind of stuff.
That every now and then that causes a bit of controversy, that one, because it's basically the one. It's a very important base, and it gives America the advantage because you see, now, like you take Russia and all them. Once stuff gets into the southern hemisphere, technically speaking, they don't have the control, but that base gives America the ability to control their missiles and all that stuff in the southern hemisphere, because you haven't got that elliptic.
Oh, well. Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many bases they've got in England, Nick. The Americans.
You've got a few. They used to have a lot of Air Force bases around.
Yeah.
I think there's actually one of the towns in Cambridgeshire down that end. There's a lot down there, East Anglia way, and there's a town, there's an American town there, and I think that's where the B-52s, Letchworth, I think it is, RAF Letchworth. It's actually American territory, I think, almost. You know, they have the
Pine Gap's basically what you just said. It's ringed, and there was laws changed a couple of years ago that no one's allowed within so many kilometres of the fence line.
Yeah, and that's right. And it's like they've even got schools for the American kids, and they don't really, they don't go out of the compound as far as I understand it. I don't know. You know, it's just a self-contained American city. You know, next to the missile base. Yeah. So maybe them are smart cities. Maybe that's what they are, smart cities.
Yeah.
Oh, they are, aren't they?
Are you talking about this video that you posted? Is that what you mean by you sent it? The Scott Ritter.
What are you talking about? That one there? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you get a chance, have a listen to that one.
Oh, yeah. I will do in a bit, yeah.
So if most of these are Royal Air, I mean that's not American at all. So I don't know why they're on this map. Weird.
Oh, they're bases anyway that we have, so it's all part of the base system. But the Americans are able to use them all. So you got to remember, just because it's Australian Air Force, you know, or Royal Australian Air Force, if America wants to land a plane there, there's no argument.
Well, I agree, but that's not the same as us paying for it, you know.
No, we're a kind country. We pay our way.
Yeah, that's it. There's a military alliance with Australia and Britain in the South Pacific, so I think, and New Zealand. So I think that's
yeah. What do you got over in New Zealand?
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, I understand, you know, joint, and maybe, you know, maybe it's worth putting some of these joint bases in.
So we traditionally, except for Pine Gap, everything else here is joint.
Do you think these are special forces? Because I could put it in under special forces now if these are special forces based, but I didn't find any evidence that these were JSOC.
No, the one up in Queensland, it's got a lot more than. So the one down in Melbourne, what's it show? Down the bottom there, what's it show? The red dot down the bottom, what's it show? I can't. It's not big enough for me to read.
Williams, Laverton, and Victoria Barracks.
No, it's only a storage. It's nothing now. That's all that old air bases now.
Joint Defence Facility, Nuremberg.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon, Ramon, if you pick up one of these, if you pick up one of these, Call of Duty or something like that, you'd get a load of pretty good information off one of them.
Yeah, maybe. You know, I mean, they invent a lot of stuff too. But the question is
the Darwin.
The real footprint of JSOC is not known, and they don't want you to know it, which is probably why it's not known.
But the Darwin Americans pay for that. All right. That was done under Obama, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably about it. 03 and the black dot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean those are obvious. Those are definitely special forces, and then that black site. But the question is, obviously they're on the correct side because Indonesia and New Guinea are up here, so that's where most of the action is going to be. It's just hard to believe. I don't know. I feel like there's something really weird about it. Obviously, there's a lot of Navy and things happening up here. It looks like there's even some JSOC out here in the middle of Okinawa. Yeah, there's a special operations port in Kadena. But then like, where's the Taiwan? It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I believe it. But anyways, I mean, it's still, regardless, it's an oversight. I mean, what's going on? Plus, like I say, if you turn on the ranges on here, it's totally out of control. Of course, the ranges don't necessarily have a lot of personnel or necessarily a massive cost. Ranges go. Where are my ranges? There we go. That's a lot of ranges.
Well, the way I see it working is they just get distributed in containers. So you just put a nuke in a container, and then it goes and sits in the country you want to nuke for 20 years or whatever.
And then
it's
for example,
so they're all over the place basically. I don't think they necessarily got to get delivered by intercontinental ballistic missiles. You know what I'm saying?
Well, here in Minot Air Force Base just alone, there's 800 bombs there and 400 warheads. But one map I had on here, it had Chicago was like completely surrounded by nukes, and there were nukes all around Pittsburgh area and stuff. And I believe that map is just verifying the information before I put it on here. It's completely insane. Completely insane. That's my personal opinion as a libertarian. Because we're for minimal government and fiscally conservative, whereas apparently conservatives are willing to spend tons and tons and tons of money you don't have on a military that is, to me, is unsustainable.
That's well, it's opinion. Obviously not been effective.
Well, if you listen, to what Ritner says, and if like he's 80% correct, you'd have to say that we're actually not in a sweetest spot with all that as we think we are. And one of the reasons why Putin put his nukes on high alert, whatever they called it last week, by him doing that prevented the Western Alliance doing it. Because if you both go to it, any little speck of dust is likely to set it off. So, for instance, when 9/11 happened in the US, one of the first phone calls apparently was Putin ringing Bush to tell him we're standing down all our nuclear stuff. So that way then they had clear of what was going on.
Yeah, and I think these tricky situations are going to happen more and more. Really, the more and more messing around these different leaders are doing, posturing for engineering the power strategy, and it's a very dangerous thing to be playing with, really, and of course it's a massive smokescreen for all the other programs that are rolling along, and. So let's see what happens. I suppose until it affects you directly, and then you've got to get on a train like all those Ukrainians who are having to split. Just keep batting on as though the world's, nothing's different, nothing's changed. That's the way it seems to be.
So I was also wondering if this has got to do with the fact that there's not the investment in oil that there should be. You've got the North Sea, it's in massive decline. And this is partly creating a crisis in energy by taking all these players out of the market, that then as the market naturally starts falling off in so many places, the populace will accept it. Yeah, you understand what I mean by that?
Well, I think so, but as far as I can say, there's been a general decline in in the aspirations of society for maybe since the First World War. I think since the First World War around here, everything is slightly has cheapened slightly. You know, the workmanship there aren't the artisans around. There's just everything's of course getting
Right.
mechanized and
more mechanized plastic and less skill.
yeah, completely, completely, and just cheaper. Just everything's cheaper. I mean,
So
when
World War One, we haven't recovered the skills base from the loss of people in World War One.
I don't think we have, you know.
Would that be a fair comment? I think
Well,
you might be
I
right.
mean,
I don't know. I think it depends on the subject. You know, we have plenty of machinists and welders and things like that. That's not an issue. However,
I think we've
Yeah, but
recovered.
they're
I
not,
think
don't
they're
have
not
very
the
many
old trades. It's explosive.
no. I think the banking
They're not
system changed the do anything attitude that we had that we had at that time. You know, that we can engineer and build anything that we want. Um, even on a small scale, people were building railways up here, you know, and in Wales. Um, and so and just small businesses, for example, were developing a new steam pump, so they can get more tin out of the mine in Cornwall, and these were absolutely, you know, it was an economic absolutely miracle until the bankers get hold of it, and the money that they put in, well. You know how it all sort of gets corrupted and dissolves, and you're just left with a kind of slummy old factory, uh, and a population that's got no work and all the rest of it. Uh,
Well, I agree
that's
with
the
that, but I'm
cycle.
not so sure. I'm not so sure that it's the banker's responsibility to upkeep the factory. You know, obviously England, it got pretty bad there. It got pretty nasty in the '70s with all the old factories and the coal towns. And let me ask you, why does the banker, in this case, you know, I don't often take the side of bankers, but in this case, why is the banker responsible for that and not the people who live there? Why don't they take the time to clean it up? Why don't they take the time to improve the facilities? And why does the owner get it? You know, because I would think that the owner is the main person responsible for,
Oh,
you know, and the
okay then.
management,
Okay.
because
I'll answer
the
your question.
managers live
I'll
the
answer your
managers live
question.
there.
There's a guy in Rotherham, right, who owns a farm, a large farm. He's got enough money to put a coal pit there, employ thousands of coal miners to work underground all day, all the lives. They work all the lives, and
Sure.
there's a community of them. So everything that they earn is spent back in that community, and they work underground all day. The kids go to school. They play rugby.
Right. Right.
They all have an happy time. Now the thing is, when someone decides they want to close that mine down because they can get cheap South African products with little kids working
Right.
down the mine, what they say is it's no longer viable, and we're
Right.
going to sell that mine, and because it's our mine, you miners are all out of work, and so your
Right.
village is now
Yeah,
gone.
I don't like that kind of thing. But you
So
know, I don't see
so
how the
what
bankers. I think the
so the
owners.
idea was that the miners had a share of the actual profitability of the mine,
Good.
and a significant share because they did all the work. Um, you know, after the initial investment of creating the mine, the banker does nothing, does he? Nothing. It just rolls in until the mine is
Well, yeah, I
exhausted.
mean, the banker, once the banker's loan's paid off, he shouldn't be able to have any share in it at all. But the entrepreneur should get 80%, and the workers should get 20% plus all the pensions and everything else they want for being taken care of. That's what they should get. They should not get more than 20%. 10% would be generous, to be honest with you, but 20% I figure is a kind of a modern equivalent. But they shouldn't be the majority owners unless it is a literal co-op. If it's a literal co-op, then of course it's evenly distributed. There are people who run their businesses that way.
Well, anyway, the upshot of it is I actually worked at Drax Power Station, which was the largest coal-fired power station in Europe in 1978. I helped build Drax B, and now they closed it down when they smashed the coal industry in '82 and closed it all around there.
Right.
And then and to use the North Sea gas, so that worked for about 10 years till it had absolutely blown our economy to bits. The pound was so strong we couldn't export anything, so all our manufacturing industry went, and that and now we're burning Canadian wood. It gets landed at Liverpool. It gets freighted right across to Drax, right past all the coalfields, and we're burning Canadian wood in Drax.
What happened to the mining town you mentioned? The cooperative one. I mean, are they upkeeping it or what? Or is it getting closed down?
They flooded the mines, so the mines are destroyed.
They flooded it. You mean with water?
Yeah.
Why did they do that? I mean, if these people were owners and participants, why did they allow that to happen?
By this stage, the National Coal Miners Union had got too powerful, like you say, and so the National Coal Board, which so the government owned all the coal and the resources, and the miners had unified. So all the workforce were in a union, and all the mines were owned by the government. If you see what I'm saying. So there was no private ownership.
Problem than the banks. I mean, it sounds more like the government smashing things.
Well, presumably the government were getting the revenue out of it, so presumably they had the arrangement with the bank. So anyway, Thatcher wanted to break the National Union of Mine Workers, so she did it by smashing the coal industry to bits. It's all right because her husband Dennis had about 120,000 acres of coal mines in South Africa, which he'd already transported in a tanker up here. You know what I mean?
You have to admit, if the unions weren't so greedy, if they got paid a minimum instead of such a high fee, then these industries would do a lot better. I mean, the American Auto Workers Union, I mean, they get these American workers like $60 per hour, but then Ford and GM can't afford to operate. They're constantly needing to be bailed out. These unions and the teachers unions and the police unions, they're all completely out of control. And then people look and then they want to blame only the capitalists, and that's not really reflective of the whole situation. It's sort of like blaming the hospitals without blaming the insurance industry. It doesn't make any sense. There's enough blame to go around.
Hey, Ramon, can I try to sort of answer that in a way? Part of what you say, so let's use the auto industry as it. Why they now get the money they get, it only reflects the influx of currency. So, for instance, as there's more currency put into the system, to balance it, like through the unions, you get your payroll, you get your pay increases, right? And typically the union employees will get slightly higher. So when you say, an auto worker's now getting, say, $60 an hour in America, that reflects the devaluation of the currency within your country. Now, what happens then, of course, is the companies go, well, hang on, I can go and set up a plant, say, in Asia somewhere, and I can employ workers for the equivalent of $5 American. Well, I'll go and do that. But I believe one of the biggest problems is that people aren't allowed to go broke anymore. So if you take a lot of these sort of industries, technically speaking, in the 2008 crash, GM shouldn't be here anymore. It should have gone, right? And then something of the entrepreneurial type would have retook it up. And then that $60 an hour would have dropped back to what you would probably say in America, about a $20 an hour rate would be about the correct rate. I'd be not far wrong with that assumption.
Well, I have to agree, I suppose.
You understand? So no one's allowed, these big corporations aren't allowed to fall over anymore. They're not allowed to go broke.
Too big to fail is ridiculous.
But that's really a fallacy, because they get bigger all the time. And eventually when they do fall over, it will be massive times worse.
Yeah, no, I mean, yep, I'm in agreement with you there.
You know, and the thing is, when people go broke, they tend to get punished. Corporations go broke. It's the people that the corporations owe that get punished.
Right. No, I agree. It's definitely a raw deal. I just don't know. I mean, I've been one of bankers a lot. It's just, but the upkeep of the business is not. Now, maybe it should be something the bankers pay attention to, because if they want to get paid back, maybe they should do a better of keeping track of whether these businesses are actually viable.
Well, you've also got to remember the bank's only got to get paid back about 30% of the borrowing, and they've got all their costs back, because the rest of it's created. You know, so in that regard, you know, it's not hard to technically recapitalise the bank when needed. And you don't have to go and rob all the savings to do it.
I think another problem is you've got so many entities owning many corporations. So what's the point of Peter suing Paul when Peter and Paul are owned by the same person? It's when you own it all anyway. Why would you have one doing the other?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
We had the auto.
It's not a very well engineered system
in Australia. We had the auto workers in Australia forgo pay rises for about 6 or 7 years, under the guise of, if you don't take a pay rise, these plants will keep going, right? And then GM just up one morning and turned around and said, "No, we're pulling the pin, we're out of here." You know, and at the end of it, all it did was cost those workers a lot of money in redundancy. They would have been better off getting the pay rises anyway. When GM decided they were running away, at least they would have got a higher redundancy payment.
Yeah.
You know, it might have shut 12 months earlier.
Well, sometimes you used to have these management buyout schemes, didn't you, with companies that, you know, it's fair enough if they can't compete on international markets. You know, there's a big community basis for that work for a lot of people. Sometimes that workforce will say, well, you know, 10 of us will invest there and keep the factory running, you know, for as long as we can, and see if we can.
This is an example of why I think that the dual layer economics will work, because no matter how weak or strong Britain is, let's just stick with England for a moment, then internally it would always have some, you know, so-called charge, the economic charge in this case, circulating, right? Because as it engages in the world economy, in the dual layer, some of the charge comes back, and so you kind of create a natural buffer. But right now, the way it is, you can, you know, let's say Walmart in America, right? They can pull money from all the small towns of America, all go back to headquarters. Doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
And that's why I think breaking up monopolies is really important. and I think that it's not really capitalism to blame, but government is failing to enforce its rules, its own rules about trusts, and the entire what you would call the private equity game in general is probably a lot about the same issue. We have no regulation of these trusts, and that's a huge problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like that. I would agree with that. I mean, in Britain, we used to have the House of Lords, and although that was comprised of hereditary peers, they generally assumed that title after many of them had legal experience. They were landowners. They were the old nobility, but so they knew what happened inside a courtroom, and they had the most to lose when laws were made in the House of Commons. That when those proposals went up to the House of Lords, who scrutinised them and could make amendments to get, and then send it back to the House of Commons to get passed with those amendments. Now what happened is Tony Blair, who was Bush's bum chum or whatever he was, he started appointing. They wanted to get shut of hereditary peers, fair enough, but instead of putting experts into those positions, he started appointing his political affiliates, and so he got yes men into the House of Lords, and that's who's there now. And so all the laws that are getting passed aren't getting scrutinised properly by experts.
So the House of Lords has become diluted with corrupted interests. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And so there's just basically
neocon strikes again.
That's the one. So
we call them political appointments.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we've got. So that's what we've got. We've got just political appointees everywhere. We've got a civil service that's running our country from London, and who are completely detached from sort of the reality of the rest of Britain. And I suppose we're just directed to carry on paying bills, I suppose, however you can.
Well, sure. I mean, it's nothing. It's neo-feudalism, right? So, in the Enlightenment, we decided we wanted to move away from feudalism, and now we're like, oh no, that feudalism looks good. When you have a bunch of people who can jet set, right? And the regulars, and then they tell us that we're the ones causing the carbon footprint. The gall of some of these people. I just saw Stephen Colbert earlier decided to tell everybody that he's willing to pay a few extra dollars for the Russia situation. Except for the problem is, not only is he a millionaire, but he drives an electric car.
Well, he's an absolute.
I mean, the nerve of these people, but how can they not take advantage when the riffraff cheer for their cake? I mean, I don't. If you're dumb enough to sit in that audience and believe this guy is being sincere, I guess you deserve it. I don't know. I don't know. Americans,
it's worth it to pay $300 a barrel to keep those pesky Russians at bay. Of course, it's worth it. We all don't mind paying that to keep those pesky Russians.
Well, but it's funny. Donald Trump was keeping them at bay and we were getting better prices. So
exactly, yeah.
What I don't understand is where in the world do these people get off telling me that this is the price to keep safety in the world? And I'm sitting there going, we already had Russia contained, and we had a better improving relationship, which is what you want when somebody has the same number of nukes as you, roughly speaking.
Exactly.
And instead these neolibs and neocons come in. And now that I hear that, he gave another little speech, and the neocons and the McCainites of Congress are out there cheering on Biden for the day. Of course, that'll go away when they get back to their normally scheduled argumentations. But it's just amazing to me that people. Well, you know who said it right? CCR a long time ago. They said, he said, you'll ask how much should we give, and they'll say the only answer is more, more, more. It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no fortunate son. I feel bad for the poor, because the poor are going to be the ones that they sign up for this world war, and they're going to tell them that it's to defend democracy and things like that have nothing to do with the issue at all. And it just keeps going around, and it's madness. It's absolute madness. I mean, I'm sitting here adding NATO bases while we're doing this all.
The propaganda, the reverse propaganda that we're getting here, which would be no different. You're probably even getting it better over there. All right.
Oh, well, I only watch
what's going on there, and yet we don't see nothing. We don't see nothing. We never seen the same. If they used the same system, we would have been complaining badly about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya. Except we did them for good reason. And then we can go and change countries' borders and create countries such as Clinton did with, Kosovo, whatever, Kosovo, is it what they call it, when he split that? Yet no one else can do it. And it's getting this way that, once again, anything Russian we can't have or use, don't you go buying that vodka, right? And that's not going to fix the problem. And I agree with what you're saying, Ramona. It's no one really knows why it got to this. And I think if Trump had been in power, it wouldn't have, because he was going to dismantle NATO. And possibly this is why part of it's occurring, because they're shoring up NATO now to ensure that it's going to be very difficult to dismantle it.
I think there's something going on with morphing into this European army as well, though. I think they're very keen to set this EU army up, which basically, I can't imagine what's behind all that. It's probably just a lot of unelected officials who can decide what your security interests are. Unelected officials from Brussels who normally live in Switzerland, I would imagine, somewhere like that. Some nice place, anyway.
Well, when you hear Hitler talking, you'll see that France has virtually got nothing to offer. Well, of course, Germany, they might be a bit more technical, but they don't really have a lot to offer. Go through all those European countries, and not until you get down to Poland and Yugoslavia that you've got a mob down there that are prepared to go and actually have a good slog out if they need to. So part of that European army could be because these countries, such as France and that, need all them grouped around them because they have nothing to defend themselves really anyway.
I don't see it like that.
Once again,
I see it so they can set up this European force that they can stick on the motorways and run up anywhere in Europe at a moment's notice and quell any kind of civil rebellion going, stick all the Europe's resource on to smash that one thing to bits, like that, like the
yeah.
And
I tend to agree that there's a secret motivation here is really to get power at home by declaring that they need power somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so you could get French troops who wouldn't mind open fire on us, and I suppose our troops would open fire on whoever. So if you don't have you've got far much control. So I think a lot of these riot police are getting ferried around from all over the place in these disputes over the summertime. These ones in France, they're getting ferried in from all over the place. There we are. So as far as troops willing to go into a battle zone against other people with guns, I don't know. I don't think there's many of them around, really.
Well, yeah. Unfortunately for you guys, you guys don't really have a right to bear arms. So there is a fair chance that they would enjoy more. The government would enjoy beating up more on the people in your own places than actually going out and taking care of problems. Now we have a different kind of way of expressing that here. Our police focus on the poor, but then they won't focus on like the cartels or focus on other things. But they're not yet coming after the rural people because we're armed. But so what instead the government's all about doing here is using drugs to smash up. And people, they pretend that the government's against drugs. The government is not against drugs. The government is against other people controlling drugs, and that they prefer that they make the income from drugs, and then they smash the white Christian and the black neighborhoods. And in the future, it'll be the Mexican barrios. They'll smash them all up. And then they generate the problem, and then the cartels come in, and then now they have a circular logic. They can always get their funding because there's always a need to smash cartels and mafias. And it's all because of the way that the U.S. government wants to control the drugs. And ultimately, they want to control the drugs because if they can control the drugs, then they can also have good buddy-buddy relationship with the pharmaceutical industry. And that's really what it's about here in America. But there's been a large fear that they'll at some point try to round up the patriots for the FEMA camps, which there are 1,000 FEMA camps. So I consider whether or not to put them on the map. But these FEMA camps, but there's no necessarily proof that they're about to do that because again, we're armed, so it's hard for them to come and specifically start rounding up patriots. Because then you never know, there might be somebody like me that starts capping them. But instead, it's much easier if they can just help facilitate Chinese and Mexican drugs into the communities and break us down. It's pretty insidious and it's nasty. But once again, government is the worst memes ever created. So I don't know what anybody ever expected. It's just amazing that people think the government is going to provide any real long-term solutions. So what they're going to do is set themselves up to be powerful in their lifetimes, and then they're hoping that they're going to pass it on to the progeny. Of course, we now know that people whose progeny are raised in certain privilege, they end up being failures within a generation or two. So I don't know why people continue to try. They should come up with a better system. But they do love to set up their families for ultimate wealth. Maybe the Rothschilds and Rockefellers serve the world because they keep their family empire in check. You know how they do that, by the way? They don't allow most of the Rockefellers do not have any power. They receive the money, but they don't have any power. There's only a handful of Rockefellers and Rothschilds that run the whole thing. That's how they keep it from falling apart.
So again, you need it so they can go broke to knock them out every couple.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't let them go broke, then of course there's no incentive for them to be better, to do better, right? They'll just always they'll pay off somebody in the government to help them out, bail them out, literally bail them out sometimes. Other times, of course, money with subsidies and new contracts. It's weird how GM and Ford, they really aren't viable companies, but they keep getting contracts. If it weren't for the government buying fleets of Fords and General Motors vehicles, I really reckon those companies would be dead now. And part of that would be due to the union workers, the unions driving up and making them priced out of the market, because the vehicles aren't really engineered well enough to be worth some of the upper end prices, and it's hard to compete against a really good company like Toyota. Toyota's got a very, very well-run company. It's well known for its, black belt logistics systems. They have a good deal there.
I read that. They
treat their people very well.
Toyota has slipped back on their quality over the last couple of vehicle cycles. They're not what they were.
Well, because they're fully Americanized now. Oh, man.
Possibly correct.
Yeah, I'd say it's part of what you're talking about, the cheapening of all things, right? Cheapening of all things. The plastic existence is only going to beget plastic quality. I mean, when we were a wood and metal culture, now we're a plastic and concrete culture. Concrete is not a great substance, to be honest with you. It's useful in certain ways, but it sure does make a drab set of government buildings. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there is.
We should have got into that.
I think dual layer economics and cryptocurrency has a good chance of fixing the problem, but I can't prove it yet because we need experiments to prove the dual layer economics would work. But it's what nature does. That's all I know.
Nick, we should have got into that concrete business 30 years ago. We would have been right. That seems to be where the money is out here at the moment.
I tell you, they use concrete all over the place now. You'd think they would have switched to hempcrete, but not so much.
I think it's all about lime, isn't it? It's all about the cement.
Yeah, they're running out of the sand, so they're going to start to use lower grade sand too, because they're not. Let's be honest, they're not going to pay the money to crush the sand up into a fine powder. So the cement's even going to start to break apart, in half the time. Already here, actually, the sidewalks. I've noticed that the sidewalks in my city, when they pave them, they're not the same quality as when I was a kid. I've already seen that happen. Now you can pay a driveway, like you could hire a driveway company, and you can tell them that you want a certain grade of cement, and they'll put you down a really nice cement driveway. But most people get an asphalt driveway, so they don't have that issue. But a lot of the concrete that I see laid, and then I've seen even some of the workmanship. I saw the city put in new sidewalk in one area, and they hadn't even put the spacers in. So when the concrete expands, it's going to pop up.
Yeah,
it's like, man. I mean, everything is just getting dumber and cheaper and shoddier as time goes on and the inflation hits. Now, I showed this relative to inflated numbers, commodities, so basing it off of milk, cheese, or milk, rice, and wheat, I think it was. The peak for America was in the 1990s. Of income per price of commodities. So, it's been going down ever since. And that's also the last time America had a budget surplus.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, the peak for the American worker for what their wages purchased was around 1974. Since then, they've been going backwards. And that would be the same here. And in England. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it was the 70s, 60s and 70s. Women, when they had children, weren't going back to work for a good few years. Now, of course, if they want a career, they've got to get straight back and all that business, which is a shame when you consider you've got 50 years to work at, apart from a few years maybe. I don't know. But going back in history, it just took one man to earn enough money to pay the rent and hopefully feed and clothe his kids. But then after the 60s and 70s, it took both the man and the woman to do it. You couldn't pay the rent unless there was two people working. And of course, the local factories and mill owners would do anything to keep the labour rate down. So they would provide maybe a nursery school for the child to go to school, childcare while the mum's working, which is these great facilities really. But all I'm saying is now it takes two people to earn what one could do not too long ago in history, So that's another factor, that, and then because the women used to take care of the kids out of a controlled environment, preschool age and all the rest of it. There wasn't a big industry of childcare that there is now. There's childcare industry from like toddlers, 3-month-old to whatever, isn't there? And a lot of the parents haven't spent any time with the kids, and so the kids haven't learned how to behave properly. And it causes problems for the whole lifetime of the kid. And we've got to go back to a much more human-centric way of living when all this is down, And it's a great feeling if you're walking around with a grand stuffed into your back pocket, but it's not worth striving. It's not worth everything else, is that we. You can feel equally well just sat there with a little bit of sunshine on your back, So we've got it as people develop the correct life-work balance, and not be too motivated by the greed, but by the product that you produce at the end of it, At the end of a work experience, be proud of what you've achieved. That's how we've got to be. You're not a bloody robot,
Well, I've noticed out here what they've gradually done over the last few years is they're pushing everybody, especially at that worker type level, they're pushing them all into 11-hour shifts with the promise, you get extra days off, which then they want them to work anyway, because they've virtually eliminated overtime, right? So then you've got people now here that are working minimum 60 hours a week. And they're doing that because the banks will give them the money, so they buy the bigger house, and then they get the vehicle with it and everything else. And then they find they're locked in, and then you find a lot of these people that are working these shifts, the divorce rates in those areas are fairly high. And what they find is when they have a day off, all they do is sit and veg on the couch because they're knackered.
Yeah.
And so I think the big thing is that we've lost our sense of community, where the community looks after each other and helps each other in a lot of ways.
Oh,
and we've had all these floods up in New South Wales and that, and they're complaining on the TV because just normal people got their boats out and were rescuing people. Oh, why didn't emergency services do it? Aren't they, going crook? Well, that's how we always did things.
Yeah.
Oh, but you shouldn't be doing it in your boat. You could be dangerous. Emergency services are the only ones know how to do it. Well, I don't really know that that's 100% correct. So people helping people is the best thing I think you can get. And I've got another thing at the moment too, is where the last person you talk to is your neighbour. You'll drive 100 miles to go and have a feed with a barbecue with somebody, but don't have one with your neighbour. It's possibly like that in England too, in America.
I get on pretty good with them on one side and not on the other. So yes, yeah. I get on good with both sides, but there's the mother-in-law from that side, noisy neighbour. Bloody hell, I don't get on good with her, to be honest. Yeah, so I suppose it happens everywhere, doesn't it? But I have a chat with Trevor next door on one side. He's a trucker. He works all the time as well, you know, so you don't see him a right lot. But yeah, like you say, you just keep you busy. You get burnt out at some point, don't you? You know, you can't work for 60 hours a week, and you know it's all this stuff that you're paying for, or your missus is buying, and all you do is sleep when you get in there anyhow, and off you go working all the time, and you know she wants more of a life. You know,
and the thing that comes out of it, Nick, is the neurological disorders that are developing from it. We're going backwards to what it was like in the 1880s, 1890s, where unions and that were developed to try and pull some of this stuff back. But we're going back to it now, like Ramon said before, with the feudal system. For some reason, it's all been forgotten. And,
I mean, when you think of the reforms that some, you know, the unions got in the workplace, you know, they stopped kids under 11-year-old being employed, and then they stopped, you know. So there were a lot of safety legislations they managed to get through, work conditions, you know, real laws to be proud of, really, to protect the workforce from a predatory, you know, boss, mill owner or whatever. And so all these laws now, they seem to have been tampered with or forgotten somehow. And yeah, I don't know if it doesn't. Employing people is just not. It's not a business, and a business that has a lot of workforce is not going to be a good business in normal modern circumstances. But if you've got an engineering company that trains people, and you get paid for training them, so that you can get them to do your work, call it training, and you don't have to pay them, basically. You get free labour. And that's what happens a lot. So the actual value isn't in a product. Well, it's just keeping people off the dole, basically. That's it. It's just all cynical, you know, because we're not providing to our own markets. It's like 40 years ago, we'd have maybe 72, maybe 200 mills in Rochdale making various different fabrics. And there was a whole engineering. Yeah, there was whole engineering infrastructure behind that. You know, milling. Well, just every engineering process. And so there were a lot of things, a lot of new processes invented, and they had 20% of it growth rate. Rochdale had 20% growth rate in 1920. Incredible, really. And so the money comes in, and then when the investment's been paid up, there's no one to maintain anything by the look of it. I don't know how it works, really. Anyway.
Yeah, I've had this thing. So if you go and have a look at your mills in England, back then, you'll find that there was, I think you or Ramon said earlier, there was also a massive innovation happening. So, for instance, and I looked at it here with the car industry. So GM set up out here roughly 1953.
Yeah.
So I worked, and basically what I come to looking at some of the mill systems that they had in England and that, you basically had, from the day you started your mill to it was totally finished, was 18 years.
Really?
And I worked out on the idea that you set yours up with the best equipment you could today. So the person who was already down the road was all of a sudden going to be put at a disadvantage because you were that much more productive.
Yeah.
Then you had roughly around 7 years, and the next minute there'd be someone building one beside you, and it would be getting built with, again, the most modern, up-to-date new equipment.
Yeah.
So by the time that was all going, at about the 13-year mark, you'd ran your race. And after that, you just slugged along until you went out the back door at around the 18-year mark. That was the end of you. And I looked at the car industry in Australia, and you had GM, for instance, set up out here around 1953. And 1970, they were finished. And the government brought in a heap of tariffs, and the government and things. And I remember when they bought out the HQ Holden here, right? It was do or die. If this doesn't be a big seller, it's the end. So they got an impetus out of that because, like I say, they got assistance from the government and everything. And then they went along pretty well. And then around the late 70s, they brought out these Commodores, and they sort of babbled along. And then the next big shot they got was when Ronald Reagan bought all the company debt that time. Do you remember that, Ramon? So Ronald Reagan let them all write off their debt. And that gave them another run, and that was around 1986, 87, I reckon.
Yeah.
And if you have a look, that was around 2004 where it all started to go bang again, because all of a sudden the technology was stale and they were indebted.
Yeah, the definitely the situation was. I don't know. I've never been a huge Reaganite, right? So there are conservatives.
No, I'm not saying I'm a Reaganite.
I'm not saying you are. What I'm saying is, like, I've never thought that Reaganomics was a good thing. People credit it with winning the Cold War, but except for we didn't win the Cold War, right? We prolonged it. And then number two, it's expensive. Reaganomics is expensive, as you were just talking about. I mean, subsidies is just welfare on a large scale. And welfare is, in my mind, not a good thing. You need programs out there for helping people in emergency situations. The welfare implies a permanent, continual drip, and that's a very bad thing.
Free honey.
Yeah. So yeah, not just free money, but an encouragement of
free honey.
Oh yeah,
free honey.
Yeah, free honey. But it's the weakness that it promotes that bothers me. And what you're talking about is just setting up these industries to become weaker. Of course, the government puts in little stipulations. You got to do this. You got to do that. That's what they did with Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. But I don't think that the housing industry got stronger because of these reforms on Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. I think that it just prolonged the problem because the CDOs still exist. A lot of people don't know this. They're called bespoke tranches in America. Now they're called CDOs that are the rest of the world. Nobody did anything about it anywhere else, but they're called bespoke tranches in America. So the CDOs are still there, and then the credit default swaps are still there. Which the credit default swaps, in a way, the crisis wouldn't have been so bad if there weren't so many credit default swaps against the CDOs failing, because they would have just swept it under the rug. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm just saying, like, there's no regulation on these credit default swaps. And so, I don't know. It's a tendency among humans to, and this has been proven through experimentation, with the whole instant gratification test with children and marshmallows, that the vast majority of people will take the pay me now rather than the than delaying the instant gratification. And that's a sign of a low
My
intelligence.
eldest daughter,
It's a
my
fact.
eldest daughter tells me, I don't know.
The worldwide average
I don't know
IQ
what
is,
you are.
yeah, it's
Sorry,
just too low.
my eldest daughter tells me.
Uh-huh.
As my eldest daughter tells me, I don't know why you worry about all that stuff, Dad. You just got to live the now.
Right. Yes. The was YOLO. You only live once, right?
And the beauty of the credit, the beauty of the credit default swaps is this. You can't unpick the mess because at the end of it, the way they're designed, nobody knows who owns who. So what happens is it's like you and I are both standing there with the loaded gun pointing it at each other, and it's a bit like the nuclear system. It's if I push the button on you, it doesn't matter because I'm dead anyway.
Right.
So
it's not a winning
credit
strategy.
default swaps for the finance. Yeah, credit default swaps are a similar strategy. Right, so
Yes.
if it ever blows up, everybody gets blown up, even if you run a good business.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's not forward thinking, right? It's a zero-sum game is the other way they put that. And I guess a Mexican standoff is peace, but it's not really peace. At some point, someone gets shot, and then usually all get shot. And so I don't see that it is a real solution. That's why I like the spacer solution and the dual layer economics out of MIMS, because I'm trying to provide an actual solution out of here. But the truth is, the world average IQ and TIQ is too low because people with low IQ, they usually resort to solving things with violence first. Violence of words or violence with action. Now my EQ is rather average. So I lose my patience with stupidity really quickly. Whereas people with higher EQ, they're able to do far more. But the truth is that at least my high IQ and my TIQ keep me out of trouble, which is something my friends did not have. Frequently, they got themselves into trouble because their tempers got the better of them, or making short-term decisions and not delaying instant gratification. And that is the real problem worldwide. It's not that the average IQ is not even close to 100 in the world. It's not even remotely close to 100. And you're not even smart yet at 100, right? You're just barely functional in a modern society at an IQ of 100. You could file your taxes and you could work a job, but you can't really run a business very well. Just think about that. At 100, not that you're not even that smart.
Because again, I have another saying, right? Because my auntie said to me a few years ago, she goes, "You've been lucky, Andrew. You never had to grow up because you just got bigger toys to play with." I said, "Yeah, that's right." I said, "The beauty of it is I didn't have to use my own capital either."
Let's see. Well, they think it's 100, but no, it's not. I'm telling you.
It's always more difficult too if you're using your own capital, Ramon. You have to sort of think and care a bit about what you're doing. Where if you're not using your own capital, well, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter.
No.
If you go broke, I'll just go down the road and work for the next fella.
Here you go. This is a thing that nobody wants to talk about. Okay. Now here's the top countries. It's a pretty good list. Starting the United States being at the bottom of this list here, and then going up from 100. Now the United States is actual average 98, but we'll just say it's 100. And you go up. That's a very short list. Here's the majority of the world by far.
The authority. The authority
by far.
So what's that list about, Ramon? Because
it's the IQ. It's the average IQ of the world.
Oh,
the average. And then if we open up the map, you can see that a huge amount of the world is has an IQ well below, because 100 is a fairly dark color here. You know, it's like the West, Argentina, which is pretty much a white country, and then you have Australia, New Zealand down here, and you got, of course, China and Japan and South Korea. They're above 100 over here, and then you got Central Europe is somehow kind of higher, but the majority of the world, and where the problems all coming from: South America, Central America, Africa, Middle East, Bangladesh, Indonesia. That's the real issue. Now, we can build up those assets. We can actually teach it. You can raise IQ. There is some evidence that you can't, do it too much, but you actually really can. There are programs that over time, generation by generation, but that's not what we do. Instead, we go in and we just give them free stuff. Here, have this road. We're not going to teach you how to make a road. There's a video on YouTube that it's so sad to watch. It's people in Africa trying to create powered flight. And I think to myself, I'm like, why doesn't somebody just give them the schematics for an old Cessna from the 1960s and 70s? I mean, it's not like anybody's using the Cessna anymore. Just give them the schematics. And here you go. Here's how it's built. You don't have these parts? Well, here's how you get these parts. It's very, very sad. And, instead of teaching the world how to actually improve itself, we moralize the situation. And when I have a kung fu student who's not got any talent, obviously I don't first think when I come in, I'm like, oh, you'll never be a black belt. That would not be a very nice thing to do. And it's also not necessarily true. I've seen people with no talent become actually decently skilled and able to handle themselves a little bit. Now, some people really honestly, and I mean this honest to God, it's just like basketball or golf or whatever. They just don't have it. They don't have the it that it takes to become very good at boxing, kung fu, wrestling, etc. However, you put them through enough pain, and a surprising number of people will become resilient. They won't move correctly, but they'll become resilient. And I have a black that's just like that. He's just not coordinated. He's coordinated when it comes to music, but when it comes to actually moving like that, he's not coordinated. However, I put him through enough pain. I would not say that he is easy to grapple for the average person on the street. And this is something that can be done. This map shows the problem and how bad the problem actually is. There are some places in Africa where the average IQ is under 65. And we're just over there setting up bases. Okay, if the bases are building schools, okay. But if the bases are just there handing out water bottles and T-shirts and stuff that come from churches, and because we have so much materialism, we have plenty to donate, I don't think that that's a solution. Just plain and simple, I don't think it's a solution. And you can see where does anybody see massive violence problems out of South Korea? Do you see massive violence problem out of what is that, Norway there? Is that Finland? What was it? No, it's Sweden. That's Sweden. Anybody see massive violence problems out of Netherlands or Denmark? No. Where are the violence problems? They're in the places where the average IQ is under 100, period. And in America, it's bad enough. But those areas in America that are the most violent have an average IQ under 100. That's a fact of both psychology and biology. And we have to deal with that issue if we really want mankind to improve and get off this, be able to get off this planet and to treat the planet better, to treat each other better. It's not only an ideology or economic problem. It is an IQ asset issue. And you can improve the IQ because most of the descendants of slaves, right? They came from this region where the average IQ is between 65 and 70. But in America, the average IQ among African Americans is closer to 80. Okay, so clearly there is a certain improvement that has been made with literacy. So why do we not introduce? You don't hear people in Black culture rapping about engineering. I was listening to rap last night, and at least talking about free speech and talking about it was patriotic rap. They were talking about free speech, and they were talking about their Constitution, and they were engaged with that. But mostly, it's not that. It's mostly talking about very, I would say, shallow things. Fame, money, women. That's not that far removed from tribalism. So that can be improved. But the issue is no one's allowed to talk about it. And because no one talks about it, then there's no actual motion to improve it. And wouldn't you know, that benefits one party in specific. One party in specific. And that's, to me, that's actual institutional racism. The institutional racism among cops has been disproven. And I have a whole paper even dedicated to showing that both sides are lying about it. But if you want to talk real solutions in engineering, well, it's politically incorrect. Well, why is rationalism politically incorrect? Well, because of the socialist agenda. And why do socialists want people to be ignorant about being rational and logical? Because then they're easier to control. They're easier to control with fake information and lies and propaganda. And they'll tell them that anti-racism and CRT are not racist, whereas if you have an actual definition of racism, you use the actual definition, then that makes you a white supremacist. And that's lies, complete lies. And it's part of a general asymmetric warfare agenda anyway. So I think that we have to do a better job of calling it out. And we also have to just be willing to say the truth, which is that the vast majority of the world is lagging in development. And I don't mean industrial development. Development.
No, overall development. Now, while you're on that, so the other night in Australia, they had this show on, and it was an investigation. So you got these Aboriginal communities, and they develop heart problems. I think it was meningitis, they said. Now, basically, no. So, basically it came across as it's a black problem. But when you listen to the people in the communities talk, and so governments have promised them better housing, governments have promised them all sorts of things, but nothing's developed. And I said to the missus after it, I said, I could fix that. I'd go around and find the different tradespeople, especially people, say, like Nick, that have been and done it and that. And I'd say, would you like to go and spend 3 years up there teaching these people how to build some houses, teaching them how to do the plumbing, teaching them how to do the electrical work? And then instead of then sending them to Brisbane or somewhere to a TAFE college to do that side of it, no, send the people up there every now and then to go through that college side of it with them. Because once they leave the communities and go to the cities, they tend to don't go back.
Yeah.
So send the people up there and teach them. And then over time, teach them the skills to become self-resilient and resilient within themselves. And then they will all of a sudden, their next generations will start wanting to go and get educated to become medical people and things like that you also need. And then the issues will start to be repaired. But again, Ramon, that's a 30-year plan to do that, because it's generational. And it's like you're saying, we only want to deal with it as a quick fix. Let's raise some money. It's the same with the housing. Like that. The housing they do build them cost a fortune because everybody's milking the pot along the way.
Yeah.
Instead of whereas you get, like I say, you get someone like Nick who's done it all, goes there and teaches these people how to do it, right? It'd be a lot cheaper than what they do now. And like I say, after it, they wouldn't maintain their houses. They had the dignity. Because they built it, there's a dignity in it. You understand what I mean? And now what were you going to say?
Yeah, but the thing is that they won't want you to tell the truth. You go to tell the truth. Well, it's not politically correct. Well, who cares if it's politically correct? If it's true. You know, that's my mentality. I mean, literally, when I tell people that such and such is retarded, I'm using the medical definition of it. I'm not using it per se as a slur, because when I grew up, the slur was retard. We would emphasize the re. When I say something's retarded, I mean it's not developed. It's underdeveloped. But you can't say that, because that's not politically correct. That's the actual definition. That's what the word means. It means slow, underdeveloped. And you know, but they don't want you telling the truth. If you gathered a whole mess hall of women and told them why feminism doesn't work, I mean, can you imagine the reaction, right? And if you gather a bunch of these young millennials together, the guys, and then you tell them why they're beta, they would lose their minds, and they would become violent minded instead of actually listening to the concepts of strengthening and what a man is. So it's a right pickle, is what.
Yeah, but a lot of these sociological categorization concepts are, you know, they can be dubious. That's one point. And the other thing is, it's a soft science. It can be manipulated by other interests, you know, so socio-political factors determine who's what.
Absolutely.
But just as a for instance, you check out the colour of the most predominant musical geniuses in the 20th century, and in American, and most of them are black, and so I think whatever.
I would say 50-50, but that's just my take.
Oh yeah.
And again, a lot of our favorite bands happen to be British.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as far as actual musical genius goes, you know, developing skills.
I don't know. You know, people they focus on the jazz, they focus on the blues, but they forget people like you know, they forget the symphonic. You know, the ones who make the soundtracks, they forget the Philip Glasses. They forget that kind of thing. So, you know, I did a fact. There was an image, and he wasn't making the statement, but I made a meme about it, because there was an article out of the Root saying that white people have stolen all of black people's music. So I had this rapper, and he's shrugging like this. All around him are musical instruments. Every single instrument in the picture had been invented by white people. Every single one. So there would be no. And what I'm saying is a yin and yang. The two go hand in hand. So why is there such an agenda to try and to get rid of rock and roll music? Why is there such an agenda to try and downplay? You're never gonna. I don't know if we'll ever see a heavy metal band play at the halftime show again. I don't know if we'll ever see even the country play at the halftime show or the Super Bowl. It's all got to be pop and rap. And I love, like I said, I was listening to rap all night last night while I was playing Division 2. But it was, you know, Christian and conservative rap, or at least independent rap. In the case of Tom MacDonald, I bought his album, The Brave. I definitely recommend people buy it, because it's what a lot of us are feeling, and the anger in there is real. And I've tried to warn people who are so-called progressives and lefties, like, look, you are messing with a serious force, and you're going to regret it. And so, you know, he would have been number one on the Billboard, but he just put out a video about how the Billboard, the company that informs Billboard about the data, is totally screwing them and keeping them out because they're independent and they're not controlled by the major publishing company. And he had music industry insiders emailing this company, telling them, and they're just outright ignoring all of it because it's agenda, because it's a conspiracy. And so once again, there's a conspiracy fact, and conspiracy facts always exceed conspiracy theories in number. And you know, it's just a sad thing to see, though, that he has to spend so much time defending himself because he happens to be a white rapper. But now he's gotten to the point where he's just saying what we're feeling. what people like here in Kentucky or Tennessee or West Virginia or whatever, what we're feeling. And I grew up listening to rap. I liked both sides. And now they're going to try and change the definition of racism to say that we're all racist automatically just because we happen to be white. It's crazy, and it's evil. It's actually satanic. And progressivism has always been anti-Christian all the way back since the early 20th century when progressivism got its going in. It was a bunch of atheists and socialists, but now it has power and money behind it because there's foreign adversaries that are putting the money to it, and Soros, etc., and the New World Order, and they funnel the money in to break down everybody. And it's high time that regular people stop being afraid to call it out. So what if you get banned off of Facebook or Twitter? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, I've been off of Facebook and Twitter for a couple of years. It has not affected me at all. It has not affected my life. I missed a couple of family members, but you know what? At least they don't irritate me with bad politics or, ignorant posts, and probably vice versa. They might actually miss me because they don't see me constantly posting libertarian positions, which the like is not irritate the conservatives sometimes just as much as it does the Democrats. So, they don't see me on there posting libertarian type positions, and I'm not seeing their nonsense being posted. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win. Plus, I get to escape the big data, big brother Orwellian machine that is now censoring everybody. And I've been able to talk about COVID. The first time I've ever been censored with COVID was the Pulse episode that got removed. First time. I've never had that happen before. Because I'm independent. So I post on my website anything I want. So I don't know. I think that people need to seriously consider what real strength is inside of themselves and stop asking for the system to give them a handout or give them permission or tell them that it's okay and that you're not going to be censored, or who cares if you're censored? I mean, I care about censorship, but if you're censored, take it as a badge of honor. Take it as a badge of honor. That's my opinion. Anyway, a lot of these bases, by the way, I'm looking them up. So the ones from this map are actually closed. So I think that's the issue, according to, of course, the internet. So who knows? Are we still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know.
Yep.
Well, it's been a good episode. I guess it'd be a good place to wrap it up with my little rant there. I hope people will go out and do a little martial arts or something, get themselves a little bit more prepared. We have the guide on the gateway. If you go to the directory, I have a guide, like a preparations guide. It's like a checklist and such. So hopefully people will take the time to get more prepared, but keep abreast of the situation. I'm going to look and see if S2 Underground has a new video out today about the Ukraine situation. It's not yet resolved. People were like, has he won this war yet? It's like, no, it's ongoing. Like, I just watched a video, and it's serious NSFW. The Russian tank just rolled up on an intersection. There was a car with two elderly Ukrainians. They were driving down, and without even verifying what it was, just blasted, just straight out of. I mean, they were dead instantly, and then he kept blasting it until there was nothing but the bottom part of the car left. And like, this is a serious. The situation is serious, and people need to start taking.
It's got nasty.
Huh?
It's got nasty now, Ramon.
Yes, it's very nasty.
I think they thought they would go in and bluff them over and be able to sit down and do whatever. I think Putin probably thought he could get in. He could probably get in there and get a deal off them with a bit of force, relatively easy. And he's found out that no, they're not going to do this. There's plenty of others. All right, we're going to have to.
They'll dug in.
Yeah, they've dug in with the help of everybody, and now Putin and his military are now going, well, we're going to have to show them how it's really done.
and it's just going to get bloodthirsty and nasty. And
Yeah.
I've seen where there was this old bloke who was in the forces in England, and he was 61. He goes, I'm a grandfather, and I believe in freedom, and I'm going over to Ukraine to help the Ukrainians. And the Russians are saying, he's come over and do that, and we're just going to take this. So I don't know whether that's really going to be a long-term help or just prolong it and make it get worse and worse all the time.
Well, they're talking about lending them jet fighters, lending them this, more rapiers, rapier per tank, and it's £1 million a throw every time one's fired off for somebody in someone's pocket, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not only that, the oil supply is what it's all about, really, and juggling around with this. Who's got the energy? This is the big one. But unfortunately, it's pushed Russia and China close together. This, which was a stupid thing. Trump had it going right there. He had it going right. They had the best relationships with Russia going for a long time, and that's all been destroyed, all that work, and now we're back to square one again. Well, that suits some people, I suppose.
Yep.
It does indeed.
And you give them, you give the Ukrainians, say, 50 MiGs, all right? That just means then Russia's got to send 200 in.
That's it.
You get what I mean?
That's foreign involvement then. That's foreign involvement, and that's nuclear war.
That's right. That's right. You'll see some Russian tanks get destroyed, but then he'll turn around and in return they'll send 200 back, and they'll just make a bigger mess. And I can see this. I can see the Ukrainian people are now being used as the puppetry for some, like you said, Nick. It's about oil and other things, and So, but I say, listen to that Rittler thing. He got some interesting points in what he said.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I don't really think we, like what Putin's doing's not right, but we haven't been perfect either.
Well, of course not. I mean, you can't trust the back to this map. I mean, this empire is completely out of control, and so any propaganda coming out of it is a bunch of hogwash. And, now Putin is a thug, and what he's doing is wrong. At the same time, we pushed that button. Kamala Harris went over there and started talking about Ukraine joining NATO. Of course, they had told us what they would respond with. So, and it's all on purpose. And it's these giant powers, same elites. And I say that hell with all of them, to be honest with you. But anyway, so I'm going to hit the stop record here, and it's a good